Have you ever wondered what happens when the world's most predictable personality type suddenly becomes completely unpredictable? Picture this. Your gentle, harmony-loving INFJ friend who's always been the peacekeeper suddenly quits their stable job without notice, cuts off toxic family members, or moves across the country on a whim. What's going on here? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating psychological phenomena in the Myers-Briggs world, when INFJs go rogue. And trust me, when these quiet observers decide they've had enough, their moves can shock everyone around them. 1. The calm before the storm, understanding INFJ's default mode. Let's start with what we know about INFJs in their natural state. These folks are the classic people pleasers, aren't they? They're the ones who'll sacrifice their own comfort to make sure everyone else is happy. They're intuitive, caring, and always seem to have this sixth sense about what others need. But here's the thing, and this is crucial, INFJs are also incredibly complex. While they're showing the world this serene, accommodating exterior, there's often a completely different conversation happening inside their heads. They're constantly processing, analyzing, and storing away every slight, every disappointment, every moment when someone took advantage of their kindness. Think of it like a pressure cooker. 4 months, maybe even years, an INFJ will absorb stress, conflict, and emotional labor without complaint. They'll rationalize other people's bad behavior, make excuses for toxic situations, and convince themselves that things will get better if they just try harder. This phase can last surprisingly long. INFJs have an almost superhuman capacity for patience and understanding. They'll stick with difficult relationships, challenging jobs, and draining situations long after most other personality types would have walked away. 2. The breaking point, when enough really is enough. So what exactly triggers an INFJ to go rogue? It's rarely one big dramatic event. Instead, it's usually the accumulation of smaller disappointments that finally reaches a tipping point. The moment when they realize that all their patience, understanding, and emotional investment hasn't been reciprocated or appreciated. This breaking point often comes with a crystal clear moment of realization. It's like suddenly seeing a situation with perfect clarity after months or years of mental fog. The INFJ finally understands that they've been undervalued, manipulated, or taken for granted, and something inside them just snaps. What makes this even more intense is that INFJs have incredibly high standards for authenticity and meaningful connections. When they realize they've been investing in relationships or situations that don't meet these standards, the disappointment can be overwhelming. The breaking point often involves a betrayal of trust or values. Maybe it's discovering that a close friend has been talking behind their back, or realizing that their workplace doesn't actually care about the causes they're passionate about. Whatever it is, it strikes at the very core of what the INFJ believed about the relationship or situation. 3. The door slam, INFJ's most famous rogue move. Let's talk about the infamous INFJ door slam. This isn't just closing a door, it's welding it shut, throwing away the key, and pretending the door never existed in the first place. When an INFJ door slams someone, it's final. We're talking complete radio silence. No explanations, no second chances, no gradual distancing. One day you're in their life, the next day you simply don't exist to them anymore. This move shocks people because it's so completely out of character for the usual INFJ behavior. These are the people who typically give endless chances, who try to see the good in everyone, who'll bend over backwards to maintain harmony. So when they suddenly cut someone off completely, it leaves everyone scratching their heads. The door slam isn't cruel or vindictive, it's protective. By this point, the INFJ has usually tried multiple times to address the issues in the relationship. They've probably had internal conversations, dropped hints, or even had direct discussions that were ignored or dismissed. The door slam is their final act of self-preservation. What makes this move so effective is that it's usually permanent. Unlike other personality types who might slam doors in anger and then cool down, INFJs rarely reverse this decision. Once that door is closed, it stays closed. 4. The Great Disappearing Act, vanishing without explanation. Another classic rogue move is what I like to call the Great Disappearing Act. This is when an INFJ suddenly removes themselves from situations, relationships, or even entire social circles without any warning or explanation. You know that INFJ who was always at every social gathering, always available to help, always checking in on everyone? One day they just aren't. They stop showing up to events, they don't respond to group chats, and they become mysteriously unavailable for all the activities they used to prioritize. This move is particularly confusing for the people left behind because there's no dramatic confrontation, no angry words, no clear reason for the withdrawal. The INFJ simply fades away like they were never really there in the first place. The disappearing act often happens when an INFJ realizes they've been giving more than they're receiving in their social connections. They might recognize that they're always the one reaching out, always the one making plans, always the one providing emotional support. Once they stop initiating contact, they discover that many of their relationships don't actually run both ways. This realization can be devastating for an INFJ who values deep, meaningful connections above all else. Rather than confront people about the one-sided nature of these relationships, they often choose to simply step back and see who actually notices they're gone. 5. Career chaos, professional life upheavals. INFJs going rogue in their professional lives can be absolutely jaw-dropping. These are often the employees who've been model workers for years, reliable, dedicated, always willing to take on extra responsibilities. They're the ones management counts on, the ones who stay late without being asked, the ones who care deeply about the company's mission. Then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, they hand in their resignation. No 2 weeks notice, no detailed explanation, no attempt to work things out. They just decide they're done, and they're done immediately. This professional rogue behavior often stems from a values conflict that's been building for months or years. Maybe the INFJ has watched the company make decisions that contradict its stated values. Perhaps they've been passed over for promotions while watching less qualified people advance. Or they might have finally realized that their passion and dedication aren't actually valued or rewarded. The trigger is often surprisingly small, a comment from a boss, a policy change, or being asked to do something that violates their principles. But it's the final straw that breaks the camel's back, and suddenly this reliable, steady employee becomes completely unpredictable. What's particularly shocking about INFJ career moves is how little they seem to care about practical considerations. They'll quit without having another job lined up, without worrying about references, without considering the financial implications. It's like they've reached a point where their mental and emotional well-being matters more than security or convenience. 6. Relationship revolutions, love-life shakeups. When INFJs go rogue in their romantic relationships, the results can be absolutely earth-shaking. These are typically the partners who've been incredibly patient, understanding, and accommodating. They're the ones who've been working overtime to make the relationship work, often at the expense of their own needs and happiness. The rogue move might be suddenly ending a long-term relationship that everyone thought was solid. Or it could be making dramatic demands for change that seem to come out of nowhere. Sometimes it's as simple as finally saying no to things they've been agreeing to for years. What often triggers this behavior is the INFJ's realization that they've been living someone else's version of the relationship rather than their own. They might recognize that they've been so focused on keeping their partner happy that they've completely lost sight of what makes them happy. The romantic rogue move often involves a complete reversal of previous patterns. The INFJ who always accommodated their partner's social schedule suddenly refuses to attend certain events. The one who never complained about household responsibilities suddenly expects equal participation. The one who always compromised on major decisions suddenly has non-negotiable requirements. These changes can be bewildering for partners who've grown accustomed to the INFJ's accommodating nature. They might feel like they're dealing with a completely different person, and in many ways, they are. 7. Family dynamics, breaking generational patterns. Perhaps nowhere is INFJ rogue behavior more shocking than within family systems. These are often the family members who've played the role of peacekeeper, mediator, or emotional caretaker for years. They're the ones who smooth over conflicts, who remember everyone's birthdays, who make sure family gatherings happen. When an INFJ goes rogue within their family, It can completely destabilize long-established patterns. They might suddenly stop playing their usual role as the family therapist, refusing to get involved in drama or mediate disputes. They could set boundaries that seem harsh or unfair to family members who've grown accustomed to unlimited access to the INFJ's time and energy. Sometimes the rogue move involves cutting off contact with toxic family members, even if it means missing family events or causing family-wide conflicts. The INFJ might decide that their mental health is more important than maintaining family harmony, a decision that can shock relatives who've always counted on their flexibility and forgiveness. These family rogue moves often involve breaking generational patterns of dysfunction. The INFJ might be the first person in their family to refuse to tolerate abuse, manipulation, or toxic behavior. They're willing to be seen as the bad guy if it means protecting their own well-being and possibly modeling healthier behavior for other family members. 8. The financial freedom move, money matters. One surprising area where INFJs go rogue involves financial decisions. These typically cautious, practical people might suddenly make completely impractical money moves that leave everyone around them stunned. This could involve quitting a high-paying but soul-crushing job to pursue something meaningful but financially risky. It might mean spending their savings on travel, education, or a business venture that seems completely out of character. Sometimes it's as simple as finally spending money on themselves after years of putting everyone else's financial needs first. The financial rogue move often represents a fundamental shift in how the INFJ views money and security. They might realize that financial stability means nothing if they're miserable, stressed, or living a life that doesn't align with their values. These decisions can be particularly shocking to family and friends who've watched the INFJ be responsible and cautious with money for years. Suddenly seeing them make decisions based on passion rather than practicality can be deeply unsettling for people who've counted on their financial stability. 9. Geographic escapes. The physical departure. Sometimes INFJ rogue behavior involves literal escape, picking up and moving somewhere completely new without much explanation or planning. This isn't a gradual relocation with months of preparation. This is more like deciding on a Tuesday that they're moving across the country and being gone by Friday. The geographic escape often represents a desire for a complete fresh start. The INFJ might feel so trapped by their current circumstances, relationships, or environment that the only solution seems to be physical distance. They're not just changing their location, they're changing their entire life context. This move can be particularly shocking because INFJs typically seem so rooted in their communities. They're often deeply connected to people and places, making their sudden departure seem completely out of character. The geographic rogue move might involve moving to a place where they know no one, starting over completely from scratch. It's a dramatic way of forcing themselves out of old patterns and creating space for new possibilities. 10. Creative explosions. Artistic and personal expression. When INFJs go rogue, they sometimes channel their energy into intense creative expression. This might involve suddenly pursuing artistic endeavors they've always put on the back burner, or expressing themselves in ways that seem completely different from their usual reserved nature. The creative explosion could be writing, art, music, or any form of self-expression that allows them to process their experiences and emotions. Sometimes this creative energy is directed toward sharing their story, either through art or by becoming more open about their experiences and insights. This rogue move often involves a rejection of others' expectations about how they should express themselves. The INFJ who's always been quiet and private might suddenly become very vocal about their opinions and experiences. The one who's always been modest about their talents might suddenly start sharing their work with the world. 11. The social media purge. Digital boundaries. In our connected world, one common INFJ rogue move involves dramatically changing their digital presence. This might mean deleting social media accounts without warning, unfriending or blocking large numbers of people, or completely changing how they interact online. The social media purge often represents a desire to escape the emotional labor of maintaining digital relationships that don't feel authentic or meaningful. The INFJ might realize they've been performing a version of themselves online that doesn't match who they really are or want to be. This digital rogue move can be particularly jarring for friends and family who've grown accustomed to staying connected with the INFJ through social media. Suddenly finding themselves blocked or unable to see the INFJ's updates can feel like a personal rejection, even when it's really about the INFJ's need for digital boundaries. 12. The truth-telling phase, radical honesty. Perhaps one of the most shocking INFJ rogue moves is when they suddenly become radically honest. After years of diplomacy, tact, and carefully choosing their words to avoid conflict, they might suddenly start telling the unvarnished truth about their thoughts and feelings. This truth-telling phase can be deeply unsettling for people who've grown accustomed to the INFJ's usual diplomatic approach. Suddenly hearing exactly what the INFJ thinks about various situations, relationships, or behaviors can be jarring and uncomfortable. The radical honesty often extends to sharing their own experiences and struggles. The INFJ who's always been private about their challenges might suddenly become very open about their mental health, relationship struggles, or personal growth journey. This move represents a rejection of the emotional labor involved in constantly managing other people's feelings and reactions. The INFJ decides that their own authenticity is more important than keeping others comfortable. The psychology behind the rogue behavior. To really understand INFJ rogue behavior, we need to look at the psychological mechanisms behind it. INFJs have a cognitive function stack that makes them particularly prone to this kind of dramatic behavioral shift. Their dominant function, introverted intuition, is constantly processing patterns and possibilities beneath the surface of consciousness. While they're appearing calm and accommodating on the outside, their minds are often working overtime to understand the deeper dynamics of their relationships and situations. Their auxiliary function, extrovert feeling, drives their desire to maintain harmony and meet others' emotional needs. This is what makes them such excellent caretakers and mediators, but it's also what can lead them to neglect their own needs for extended periods. The rogue behavior often emerges when these two functions finally align around a clear realization. The current situation is fundamentally incompatible with the INFJ's deeper needs and values. Once this realization crystallizes, their typically patient and accommodating behavior can shift dramatically and seemingly overnight. The aftermath. Life after going rogue. What happens after an INFJ goes rogue? The aftermath is often a period of intense growth and self-discovery. Many INFJs report feeling lighter, more authentic, and more aligned with their true selves after making these dramatic changes. However, the period immediately following rogue behavior can also be challenging. The INFJ might face criticism, rejection, or misunderstanding from people who preferred their previous accommodating behavior. They might also struggle with guilt or doubt about their decisions, especially if they've hurt people they care about. Over time, though, most INFJs who've gone through a rogue phase report that it was necessary for their personal growth and well-being. They often develop better boundaries, stronger self-advocacy skills, and a clearer sense of their own needs and priorities. The rogue phase often marks a transition from people-pleasing to authenticity, from external validation to internal alignment, from accommodation to healthy self-assertion. How others can respond to INFJ rogue behavior. If you're dealing with an INFJ who's gone rogue, the most important thing to understand is that this behavior didn't happen overnight. Even though it might seem sudden to you, the INFJ has likely been processing these feelings and decisions for months or even years. Trying to argue them out of their decisions or convince them to return to their previous patterns is usually futile. The rogue behavior represents a fundamental shift in how they view themselves and their relationships, not just a temporary mood or phase. The best response is often to respect their decisions, even if you don't understand them. If you want to maintain a relationship with the INFJ, you'll need to accept their new boundaries and way of operating rather than trying to convince them to return to their old patterns. If you're someone who's been cut off by an INFJ's door slam, it's worth reflecting honestly on the relationship dynamics that led to this point. While the INFJ's response might seem extreme, it usually follows repeated attempts to address issues that were ignored or dismissed. Preventing INFJ rogue behavior. For INFJs reading this, recognizing the early warning signs of building resentment and frustration can help prevent the need for dramatic rogue behavior. Regular self-check-ins about your needs, boundaries, and satisfaction levels can help you address issues before they reach a breaking point. Learning to advocate for yourself earlier in the process, setting smaller boundaries consistently, and communicating your needs clearly can help prevent the accumulation of frustration that leads to rogue behavior. For the people in INFJs' lives, paying attention to their needs and not taking their accommodating nature for granted can help maintain healthier relationship dynamics. Regularly checking in with them about their satisfaction and well-being, rather than assuming everything is fine because they're not complaining, can help address issues before they become serious problems. Conclusion: when INFJs go rogue, it's rarely random or impulsive, despite how it might appear to outside observers. These dramatic behavioral shifts represent the culmination of long periods of internal processing, growing frustration, and unmet needs. Understanding INFJ rogue behavior requires recognizing that beneath their typically accommodating exterior lies a complex individual with deep needs for authenticity, meaningful connection, and values alignment. When these needs are consistently unmet or violated, the patient INFJ can transform into someone who prioritizes their own well-being over maintaining harmony. The door slams, disappearing acts, career upheavals, and other rogue moves aren't acts of cruelty or revenge, they're acts of self-preservation and authenticity. They represent the INFJ's decision to stop sacrificing their own needs for the comfort of others. For INFJs, learning to recognize and address their needs before reaching a breaking point can help them maintain their relationships while still honoring their authentic selves. For the people in their lives, understanding and respecting INFJ complexity can help prevent the conditions that lead to rogue behavior in the first place. Ultimately, INFJ rogue behavior serves an important purpose in their personal development. It marks their transition from people-pleasing to authenticity, from external accommodation to internal alignment. While it might be shocking and disruptive in the short term, it often leads to healthier, more sustainable ways of being in the world. The next time you see an INFJ making what seems like an unpredictable move, remember that it's probably been a long time coming. Behind that calm exterior has been a complex individual processing, analyzing, and finally deciding that it's time to prioritize their own well-being. And honestly, good for them.